the Assistant Executive Directors at WASA, and would love to welcome you to this inaugural run at conducting a Zoom meeting for an hour on a topic that has emerged as being one of great import to those around the state. So I'm delighted to welcome you here with us. I'm going to get us started and then turn over the program. I might be living proof of that old adage about old dogs and learning new tricks. So thank you for bearing with me as I try to navigate my way through this, and appreciate your I was going to say your confidence in me, but I've kind of started to lose all confidence in myself. I have with me this morning Jennifer Bethman, who's the Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Schools in the Bethel School District, and is also the chair of what we call our IPAC group, component group here at WASA. IPAC stands for the Instructional Programs Administrators Component. And Jennifer, along with the past chair, Vicki Bates, and along with our chair-elect, Jennifer Kindle, have been talking about what are those topics of most import. And as I said, and through a process, and Jennifer can chat about that just a bit more, this whole notion of how you as leaders within your districts can help to bring about this transition to three-dimensional learning, NGSS three-dimensional learning. And then we began to narrow that focus down to this first time out to talk mostly about high school students. I'm going to, at this point, introduce Jennifer to you and have Jennifer take the microphone to talk a little bit more about this meeting and how it came to be, and then how we envision this next hour going. So Jennifer, I'm going to mute and you take it from here.
All right, great. Thank you, Helene. So I just want to welcome everybody this morning. It's really nice to have everybody come together in this method. Helene, thank you for leading us through this use of new technology, because it is a exciting piece that we can sit in our offices for an hour and have a conversation about a topic where we are all looking for some answers and some solutions to the work that we're doing. We came upon the Next Gen Science Standards, and specifically the high school, because I think many of us are still looking for a curriculum and how to assure that our students are meeting the standards in the Next Gen Science Standards. Our sophomores, as we all know, our sophomores currently need to take the test and pass, and that's not the sole mean to this discussion, but we have the standards, and we want to make sure we're assessing and preparing our students to perform well on the standards. So we're excited to be able to be here today and have this conversation. We hope that it does turn into a conversation and not just being spoken to, but having a conversation that we are sharing and sharing ideas with each other. So I think with that, we're going to move through, and Helene, I think we're going to move right into our presentation. Is that correct? Helene, I think you're still muted. Uh-oh.
I'm back.
There she is. All right.
So I am going to see if I can share the screen now. This is my worst fear coming to fruition. So give me a second. Jana, you want to introduce yourself, and I will lend my thanks to Jana for being here with us today. I'm going to introduce you and then shoot it over to you, Jana, while I fiddle around here and get you going. Dr. Jana Weller, who is the Director of Professional Learning at Discovery Education, early on became a partner with us in helping to facilitate this conversation. We are thrilled to pieces. She is actually in London right now and is willing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for her there to share with her some of the things as you think about implementing and leading the implementation to the transition, some things that are on the minds of, as Jennifer says, your mind, as well as the minds of educators all around our country. So John, I'm going to turn it over to you. As I said, I'm going to fiddle around and get your PowerPoint up. But if I'm having difficulty doing that, are you able to do that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can share as well. So we'll just take your time. We'll just give you a few seconds to get the slides up there. Don't panic, Helene. We'll make it work regardless. So I'm just thrilled to be here today with all of you and joining you from across the pond, as they say here in London. Not based here in London, as you can tell by my accent. I'm not British. I'm actually live in the state of Florida, work for Discovery Education. And in my role there as Director of Professional Development, I have the amazing privilege of working with school systems, not just in the country, but beyond. So a lot of conversations around NGSS, and certainly my main focus as a Director of Professional Learning is on professional learning, as you can imagine. And you know, the idea of professional development for teachers, educators at all levels, and administrators as well. So when Helene and I had this conversation, and of course Jennifer, you know, is part of that as well, you know, we talked a lot about really giving an opportunity to share and learn from each other, which is really the most powerful thing that we can certainly do. So I also am joined by two of my colleagues on the line who are in the States, actually not in London at the moment with me, unfortunately, but Denise Phillips is on the line. So Denise, I don't know if you want to give a little shout out. Denise and Jason Barnes, who both work extensively as well with school systems across the country and work on our partnerships teams. So Denise and Jason, do you want to give a little hello to the group?
Hi, everybody. I don't need to do a huge introduction, just saying hi, excited to be part of the conversation. Love furthering this conversation.
Thanks, Denise.
Good morning. This is Jason Barnes, excited for this conversation as well. As Denise and Jana, we are all former educators that worked in classrooms and district levels and now work for Discovery Education. And these sort of discussions are great for our learning, but also to share what we experience with districts around the country that are making the shift to NGSS, along with all sorts of other shifts in education. So we appreciate you all coming together today.
All right, thank you, Jason. And Denise is joining us from California. Jason's in Rhode Island, and you all are in Washington. So I think we have the whole United States represented, and I'll just be representing the UK over here. So Helene, were you able to get the slides up and share?
And I'm going to let you drive.
Okay, that sounds great.
And people will let us know if they're not seeing your PowerPoint, but we're going to let you take it from here. Bye.
Sure. Oh, no worries. That sounds great. All right, so I am going to share this with you. And can we get a note in the chat box? See if anyone is able to, if you can all see those slides. Yes, I'm seeing heads nodding. Yes, I see it. Okay, great. Wonderful. Perfect. So thank you for that. Oops, wait, now I think I just lost it. Did I? Oh, let's try that again. There we go. Okay. All right. So this conversation today, as Helene mentioned, was really part of, oh my goodness. Okay, there we go. I think we're all set now. I also, part of the problem is that I see my face in the middle of it. So let's move that out of the way. So Helene, did you want to introduce anything from the beginning of this, or do you want me to just lead right into the agenda? Yes, okay. So our topic today, as you well know, is leading the transition to NGSS three-dimensional learning for high school students. And our focus really today is not that this is a presentation, but that this is a conversation. So we have two guiding questions that will lead this conversation. And Helene, I'm going to be looking to you and anyone else on the line to either give me a wave or something if you can't hear me, or if there's any type of connectivity issues. I think so far we're good. Yes, okay. So two guiding questions for this conversation today. First of all, how can we effectively transition to the NGSS at the high school level? And then how can we prepare our high school teachers for those instructional shifts of three-dimensional learning? And certainly Helene has done the welcome for us, setting the stage for this conversation. And I want to actually take a moment now to really thank them for their leadership in this work, and really to make sure that they recognize that. And Helene, I love that you said that you're kind of out of your comfort zone, because I think that's something we need to keep in mind as we're thinking about shifts, whether it be NGSS or anything else. That we're asking teachers, and we're putting all of us as educators, myself as lifelong educator, we've shifted out of our comfort zone many times in our careers, I'm sure. And the use of technology for this conversation is just one of them. But overall, this is really forcing all of us to kind of step back and think about, where are we in our practices? So whether that be a classroom teacher or a school leader or a district leader, or an organizational leader, where are we in our practices today? And what do we need to do to rethink how we can make these shifts? So one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit, just to frame our thinking, just to kind of get us, our mindsets primed, because obviously the music that I played this morning didn't do it for those couple seconds, just getting us in that framework of NGSS. We're going to do a little bit of busting some myths. So we're going to look at some statements about NGSS, and we're going to have a little conversation via our chat box around busting the myths. And then we're going to spend the majority of our time, really the purpose of this whole hour-long webinar is really sharing implementation practices. We like to say, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we can learn from all of it. So, we learn, in fact, I recently read an article on brain research that we actually grow more synapses and neurons in our brain when we make a mistake than when we get the correct answer. So I'm going to position everything with, it's okay to not know the correct answers. So framing our thinking, first of all, around the purpose and the rationale of the NGSS standards, and preparing our students for their futures. And when we think about those future, what that college career future looks like for our students, one thing we do know definitively is that we don't know what that is. So we don't know what that future is going to be for them. We don't know what jobs and careers are going to be at their threshold. As our youngest learners entering your schools today, your little guys are, as they walk out of your schools with that diploma in hand, we can't necessarily say we have a sense of what specific or what skills they're going to need, but we can't really say what fields are going to be the best one for them to get into, or what those opportunities are going to look like, because guaranteed there are going to be positions and jobs that exist then that don't exist today. So, preparing them for that unpredictable future, so to speak, and really thinking about, for our purposes today, how do those conceptual instructional shifts of three-dimensional learning impact the teaching and learning in our schools? So to that end, I'd love to hear from you about the conceptual shifts of NGSS learning. And let's use our chat box. I'm going to move some things around here on my screen so I can see all of you. Let's use our chat box. When I say that, NGSS learning conceptual shifts, just give us like a word splash of the types of things that you think of. What do you think of? What types of phrases or terms pop into your head when you hear that? I see engineering. Oh, and Nicole, great question about the slides. Yes, we can definitely, Helene has the slides. She can certainly make them available to you. Ooh, I see phenomenon, interdisciplinary, everything integrated. braided. Wonderful visual. You must have seen that interconnected braid of the strands of NGSS. Personally relevant, connected. Okay. Oh, I see things. Scientific method, three-dimensionality, storyline. Denise, you and I were just talking about that the other day, storyline. So, you know, Denise, I'm going to pull you into this conversation, I'm sure. Cross-cutting concepts. All right, great, good thinking. So you all have a large array of vernacular and terms and all of these things that fit in together around this concept of NGSS learning. And, you know, one of the things that I think is important to always keep in mind, particularly from, you know, the teacher perspective, is that just as we don't want to, you know, overwhelm our students with lots of terms and vocabulary and unfamiliar concepts, a lot of this language isn't language that we've been using traditionally. So, you know, helping teachers not just to understand or not just to know what practices there are, but even just to understand what all of this terminology means. So here's a great visual that hopefully somewhat kind of synthesizes many of the things that you all brought up, things like, you know, relevance and phenomena, coherent across curriculum, so that connectivity, that interconnectivity that some of you mentioned in the chat box, science and engineering practices, certainly disciplinary core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. So to simplify all of that, you know, really around that, and certainly, you know, there's a danger in oversimplifying, but, you know, more importantly, what does this mean in instruction? And then, you know, how do we help our teachers understand this holistically so that they can obviously break it down? So what I thought we'd do for the next 2 or 3 minutes is just talk about some of these statements and whether they are myths or confirmed. So some of you, and working for the Discovery Channel, you know, I've kind of become a little bit of a Mythbuster addict. So I will call myself out there a little bit. You know, really thinking about that idea of Mythbusters. I don't know if any of you watch or have watched the show, but you know, a lot of great science themes going on there. But I think more importantly, the concept of, you know, always seeking to find, you know, confirming or disputing things. So really being a critical thinker. And that's what, you know, I think we're going to spend some time today really working on, is that critical thinking idea. So we're going to talk about whether these are myth or confirmed statements. So the first one, I'll let you read it on the slide. I certainly don't need to read to you, but just so for those of you, if you're on the line, not on viewing it on a camera, I'll read this to you. Number 1 says, K-12 science education should reflect the interconnected nature of science as it is practiced and experienced in the real world. So how do you feel about that? Would you call that a myth, or would you call that confirmed?
Seeing lots of confirmed.
We are. We're definitely getting lots of confirmed. So when we think about, whoops, let me go back here again. Sorry, I moved too fast. My screen here looks a little bit different than what I was hoping it would today. Let me quickly move my here. Okay, so sorry again, Helene. See, you're not the only one that apparently is moving things a little bit on the screen. So let's talk about this a little bit. So this is definitely confirmed. And some of you mentioned that in your chats, in your word splash a little bit earlier, about the idea of, you know, the premise here is that science education isn't something that should be bucketed in silos, because real scientists, you know, in the scientific world at all different levels and all different fields, really practice it and experience it holistically. So that interconnectivity of the disciplines and the nature of science should be reflected in our classrooms. And, you know, we wonder sometimes if our students really understand that, because in many instances their science instruction is bucketed into earth science and life science, for example, which is fine. But when you think about the whole connectivity of even just the different subjects being siloed, and the way in which, the interconnectivity is so much more relevant and real world to them. Denise, I'm going to call on you at this point in time because I know you had some great insight into this when you and I had the conversation the other day, and I don't want to misrepresent your words. And I just got a little blurb on my screen that says my internet connectivity is unstable. So I want to make sure that we keep this going. Denise, are you able to?
I am.
There you are. Okay. So any just brief insights into this?
Well, I think, when we're working with high school teachers, that concept of the interconnected nature, I think, and I'd love to hear what other people think too. Sometimes that causes the most, it's a combination of excitement and trepidation because they've spent so many years being experts in their particular area, that when they're asked and when they're looking at how can we bring this interconnected nature in, it tends to excite them because they know that's how it should be, but it also tends to worry them. What has been your experience when you're working with your teachers and when you're discussing this with your teachers? What has been their understanding of this move and their feelings about it?
That's great. That's a great posed question. And I think as you all think about that, we'll give you a few minutes to think through that. So when we get to our discussion question, we can speak to that interconnectivity of the sciences. So let's do another statement. How do you feel about this one? The next generation science standards are student performance expectations, not curriculum. Let's hear what is that a myth or is that confirmed? Got it. So we often hear that word curriculum used to describe a lot of things. It's many cases a blanket statement of, we have a new Common Core curriculum or we have to adopt the new NGSS curriculum. So the standards themselves obviously are not a curriculum. They designate the outcomes for students. And let's see one more here. The science concepts in the NGSS build coherently from K to 12. All right, Denise, I'm going to defer to you on this one because I know that you recently had another conversation about this one. This has a little bit of the sitting on the fence, depending on how you look at this.
It kind of does. And I noticed that Michelle Lillane kind of really identified the key with this, that it's the idea that the science and engineering practices and the cross-cutting concepts are really truly the glue, the driving force through this. Because even when you think about it, if you're looking at a science and engineering practice of modeling, examining the true description as they move through the grade levels of what students do with modeling, where they're interpreting models in second, third, fourth, fifth grade, and they're actually making and using models to prove a theory or a claim in eighth grade. That's where you really see that coherency. You could argue that in other cases with the DCIs, there may not be, that, oh, well, I don't see it being that coherent all the way through. It's the SEPs and CCCs that really drive that coherency.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Denise. I'm just making sure that my connectivity is all good. So thank you for contributing to that conversation, Denise. And then how about this one? The NGSS focus on deeper understanding of content as well as application of content. What do we see? Yep, we see yes. Confirmed, confirmed. You bet. Oops, lights are going off here in London. Woo. Okay, there we go. All right. So again, focusing on that deeper understanding as well as the application. This is where, okay, so Kim says this is where it starts becoming curriculum, I think. So yeah, that connection to the content and then the application, right? So that assessment angle, the performance expectations, the performance displays of what are those, how are students, what are the outputs of students related to the standards? That is where we start to roll into the curriculum bucket.
This is Denise. Can I pop in a little bit with that?
Of course.
You know, it is interesting. I teach some master's classes, and this question always comes up: is where do standards move into curriculum? And I had one participant in my class said, well, you know, to me, the standards are the map. The curriculum is the vehicle you're going to drive to get that map. And so it kind of, to get to that location. And that kind of made sense because there's a lot of variances and different ideas of what curriculum gets us to that ability for students to apply their learning in performance expectations that really require some stamina. And so when you're talking about the set curriculum that gets you there, you could drive a couple of different vehicles to get there, but the map of where we want them to go, that's NGSS. I just thought that was kind of an interesting way of describing it. So I'm stealing it from another educator.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Denise. And then finally, science and engineering are integrated in the NGSS from K to 12. Jennifer wants some myths. She wants to bust something. All right. So
well, number 3 was a bit of a myth.
It was a bit of a myth. It was a tricky one, right? So we always have to, as teachers, you have to throw in that tricky question, right? Yeah. So I guess maybe that's the lesson that we take away from myth busting is that, and this is a good thing to always, convey to, especially with your staff and even with your students. Sometimes things just aren't black and white. Sometimes the answer is, it depends. And sometimes the answer is maybe a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And we have to be very flexible in our thinking. And really scientists think that way, right? Scientists are, although they're looking for the truth, we also know that in science, sometimes the truth changes. Sometimes what we think we knew today changes. So being open-minded and always seeking evidence is, just a great mindset to have anyway. So Jennifer, maybe that will alleviate some of your need to bust the myths. So we're going to spend the remainder of our time in this conversation really hearing from you. And we really want to, certainly we have the chat box going to, so we want you to use that as your vehicle, but we also know that you can certainly unmute yourselves and we can let you, obviously if everybody's going to jump in all at once, that's not going to work. So we can facilitate that. So if you're interested, you can either raise your hand or use the chat box to say, I'd like to describe something, or, can I share something? Certainly we don't expect you to be sitting and typing, a whole entire paragraph or 2 or 3 if you have a specific scenario you'd like to share. But we would like you to just think for a minute about those successes that you're seeing in implementation. Maybe they connect back to that conversation a little bit, with the idea of the content integration or the different topic integration in the sciences. Maybe it connects to that application. Maybe it connects to assessment. Maybe it connects to the ways in which you're supporting your teachers in making these shifts. So think for a minute, obviously, about what successes you see in your specific situation. Might be student successes, might be teacher successes. And then when you're ready, share something in the chat box, or again, if you'd like to give us, a longer elaborated discussion with or without your camera, no pressure. If you're, don't want to be in front of the camera, that's okay too, but just give us an indication that you'd like to share something more than what you'd like to type in the chat box. Okay. All right, so it looks like, is that Tana? Am I saying that correctly? Not directly
Tana,
involved.
yeah. Hi.
Oh, Tana. Okay, sorry. Thank you. It's okay, because from someone whose name is always mispronounced, I try to be very cognizant of that, and I did it wrong.
Thanks. That's
So
okay.
a strong network of people making huge strides in formative assessment. So, yep, if NGSS is that map and the destination, then, oh, curriculum's a vehicle, formative assessment is the dashboard. Oh, okay. Analogies, love those analogies. So can you elaborate on that a little bit and give us some examples of huge strides in formative assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to kind of start, and then I would totally defer to several other folks that are on the call. I mean, I see Ellen and Helene's screen there too. So Ellen would probably be able to speak more to this than I would, as would Michelle and others. But we have researchers at the university level that have provided a lot of insight into practice in terms of formative assessment, and then lots of practitioners around the state that are just taking it up as an essential part of NGSS implementation. If we don't help students understand what they know and what they need to know along the way, then we're not really going to get where we need to go. And I think there's one thing I've observed, again, I'm not directly involved at this point, but one thing I've observed is there seems to be coherence across the state in terms of how people are accessing really solid formative assessment practices. There's a lot obviously tied in with the climate science initiative. So that just seems to be a really strong point in how our state is taking this on.
I'm here with Ellen Ebert, who many of you know, and so Ellen does have a couple of comments to make before we move on, and then I think we can also follow up with some folks who have chatted and may just want to share their thoughts with everybody. So I've been trying to take some notes about who all that might be, but here's Ellen.
Oh, I just wanted to comment on Tana's comment, which is about the formative assessment piece and some of the climate science work that we've been doing this year. And I think that perhaps we would all agree, those of us trying to do the work, is that we're still baby steps. And, you know, I think we're still in that early phase of awareness as we try to percolate out the formative assessment strategies that we're trying to implement. That's all I was going to say.
So Jen Rose, I see that you have a comment about secondary teachers and ambitious science teaching. So perhaps we can look to you for a minute to add some thoughts or to speak about that success.
Sure. We contracted with someone from the University of Washington to come out and work with all of our teachers. We are a fairly traditional district, and so there was a lot of anxiety about an integrated approach. And there was also, I'd say, a lack of understanding of the complexity of NGSS. And so our traditional chemistry teachers in particular were really struggling with what does NGSS look like, and how do I trust that it's rigorous? So taking all of our teachers through just kind of establishing a baseline of this is the shift in the thinking practice that was really different from reading it, or even we've spent a lot of time discussing with each other and having teachers work together, but having that just lift outside of our own brains to be able to see a little bit more of the complexity and to think about some of the brain science, I'd say, with how learning NGSS is really different than memorization, that integrated piece, the 3D piece, is something that's pretty powerful. And Hannah's one of our science leads who could probably also comment as well.
A big part of the AST ambitious science teaching training that the teachers went through were incorporating student discourse and modeling within their structures, and that led towards the start of those science and engineering practice shifts. Starting with phenomenon has been getting them to look at cross-cutting concepts and where can they share phenomenon across concepts. Climate science has become a thread throughout every single one of our biology, chemistry, and physics classes. So they're starting to kind of integrate everything in. Just with that baseline training from ambitious science teaching. So that really kickstarted our district work to make those conceptual shifts a reality.
The other just little note that I'd add is we're also in a K-5 science adoption right now. And Hannah was just commenting that one of the things that's helped both our high school teachers and our elementary teachers be excited about NGSS is the kids just love it. Like the student engagement and interest when you're actually focused on something that is real to them has been very affirming for our teachers and helped move the shift along.
And thanks to you, Jen and Hannah. And just fill us in on what district you're with in case anybody wants to follow up with you later.
Sure, Lake Washington School District, and we would love to continue to think with people.
Okay, and this may be exactly one of the vehicles that we can use to help us continue with that conversation. Sandy Gessner, can I turn to you? I see that you had a comment earlier on.
You can turn to me as long as I can unmute my, my mic. Coming from the ESD 114, I'm going to give a shout out to Kim Weaver, who's also on this Zoom meeting. What we discovered through Jeff's work and Kim's work and Clancy's work, and now I'm up in Port Townsend working with a group of teachers. What the Port Townsend middle school teachers want is a workbook. What we know from our ESD work and multi-years of doing this is that it really takes a change of mindset for science teachers, because it's just like when the Common Core came around in ELA and math. It isn't a light switch moment. There aren't instructional materials that you can hand teachers and make this kind of teach proof. Not that that's, I mean, I don't mean that in any negative way, but they need time to really talk and see what it's supposed to look like. And if they don't have that time, they're less likely to really do any change in their curriculum or in their instruction.
Thanks. So any follow-up, or Jonna, do you want to take it back on out to the next question?
Sure. If you don't mind, I just wanted to elaborate and concur with a lot of the themes that I've heard, and seeing some of those similar influences in schools across the country. And one of the things, Jen actually mentioned, seeing the shifts. And one of the things that I think is really important for us to keep in mind, and we see more success with any type of instructional shift when we can experience it as educators ourselves. We didn't grow up with this type of instruction ourselves in our classrooms, and we certainly, as educators, I can't speak to all of you. I'm not sure how long you've been in the profession, but this wasn't part of our instruction. This wasn't the way we learned. So not only do teachers need to understand how to teach this way, they also need to see the benefits of learning this way as well. So I love that, Jen said it's important to see the shifts. It's also, I think, along with that idea is, feeling the shift. So, feeling that as a learner yourself, getting in that mindset and seeing, like you said, seeing that kids love it, and that's because of, the relevance that's there. So I think that's a, really important piece to keep in mind. So we have a little bit more around here, a little more conversation happening, using the conceptual model and the bundles from Achieve to map out integrated courses. I don't know if we want to speak to any, if Jill, yep, so a lot of experience with that at Highline. So anyone else before we move into the next facet of the conversation?
If okay with you, can we turn to the folks at ESD 171? There are some comments from Michelle as well as other people pointing to some of the work that they're doing. So Michelle, can we turn to you?
Absolutely. So in our region, about 4 years ago, we began working on developing these units, and then just a high school progressions model. We started the first year of just pure development, and each partner pair of teachers got to develop one of the 6 units. The following year was implementation and field testing, and then working on refining and publishing. We're working with ESD 113 down in Vancouver to actually use their publishing house to turn them into a PDF teacher guide And we're hoping to have that done this summer. And I know if you chat with Jill, she'll tell you their experience, at least as far as Wenatchee School District. It's spreading across our region. We have several districts, small and large, using them, as well as Tahoma School District came over and were trained on those units this last summer at our STEM Summit. Every Tuesday morning, we meet as a PLC, depending on which grade level. So the freshman course, we call it Integrated Physics Chemistry. From 7:15 to 7:45, the teachers voluntarily sign on to a Zoom meeting where they troubleshoot lessons, think about student learning, figure out what those next steps are. And then every Tuesday afternoon is our integrated geoscience biology group that meets. And right now we're in the process of writing course 3, which I'm hoping to get a CTE equivalency for as well.
So one of the things that we can do is to think about, and it may be while we're still on this meeting together, or it may be through emails afterwards, about how do we keep this conversation going and how do we support one another, whether it's by sharing resources, by sharing ideas. You know, I think that already I'm feeling this desire to do that. Jonna, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, are we okay with, can you still hear me? I'm feeling like things are breaking up a little bit. So, Helene, can you still hear me okay? I see you nodding, okay.
Yes, we can hear fine.
Okay, great, thank you. My screen doesn't look right, but so we talked about the successes you're seeing. What are the biggest challenges that you're currently seeing? So we start with the success, and now let's think about those challenges.
I'm going to jump in for Chris Griffith, although, so Chris, I saw that you had a challenge that you listed right from the very beginning. So do you want to speak to that? Or should I read it from what you had written?
Am I unmuted here? I think I am. Are you able to hear me? Yes. So that my biggest challenge is we have more experienced science teachers that are really discipline driven. We were going down an integrated approach, and as they were looking at the NGSS and trying to unpack it, they were looking for, that was the map, the vehicle, and there was just no real good curriculum vehicle out there. So they kind of hit a roadblock, and then they fell back into discipline driven approaches, and we've just kind of been fumbling ever since.
So I'm wondering if there are thoughts for Chris around how you met. My guess is, because I'm seeing some head nodding, that there are others who have experienced the same thing. So thoughts either through the chat box and or unmute and speak to what are some things that you've been doing and thinking about.
No one wants to step up to the mic?
Ellen's got a thought to offer to this conversation.
So it's a thought, and those of you who know me know you can push back. We know from research that students do better when the topics are relevant, pertain to things that they're interested in, and that they have a real life application. So the one of the things that results when we go so discipline specific is that we can lose that sense of relevancy unless we're really working hard. And when we bundle the performance expectations, earth science, life science, physical science, and engineering, we tend to strengthen that relevancy piece and that student engagement piece. And so perhaps what we need to do is make some of that research and some examples available to our teachers, so that we can provide them with some evidence about why we need to start taking a look at breaking down our disciplines a little bit. It also, I wrote it down because it's also a great area of professional learning that we could do together.
And I heard earlier, students love this, right? So maybe they become the best disciples for this, right? The students who are experiencing this relevance and this interconnectivity and really can speak to that. There's no better testimonial for instructional shifts than the students. So, perhaps thinking about, even capturing some of that and, sharing that with each other, either within your schools, with your teachers and beyond, outside of your school boundaries as well.
Nicole Flynn, do you want to speak to the challenge that you've been experiencing and put out there? And then perhaps others have responses to it.
Did you want us to speak aloud?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let Dana handle this one since she was the one that brought it up. Hi, this is Dana. One of the things that we are noticing is that some of our teachers have fully embraced phenomenon-based teaching, but it's not necessarily true across the district, and so we're struggling with how to get all the teachers on board with that. The schools where they have embraced that, all of the teachers typically are planning together in smaller teams, but I wouldn't say that it's true across the district. And so how do we bring the other schools up to speed? Could you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you. So you're asking for suggestions for taking something, kind of taking success viral, like ways in which to help maybe the resistant teachers see other successes?
Can I make a comment? This is Jen Rose from Lake Washington. Last year we had our physics teachers, but really our chemistry teachers were, I would say, close to open rebellion about not wanting to teach NGSS, and that was for someone else. They were teaching much more important things. Mm-hmm. And I spent days talking with college professors and chairs of chemistry departments at the UW and Whitman and PLU, as well as directors of admission at different colleges, and ask them what made for successful students. And I got a whole bunch of information, but I was able to bring that back to teachers because it was somewhat that their goal for chemistry was aligned to something that was 20 years old. They were quoting like the American Chemists Association for their chemistry standards. And when they actually got feedback from industry and colleges about the kinds of science students needed to, or kinds of thinking students needed to be able to master, that was super helpful, because they really felt like they were doing what was important for chemistry students, and to get new information about this is what's important for all students in science was help them get that mind shift a little bit.
Is that a resource that you can share with us?
Yeah, we hear that quite often in schools, in systems where like it's very difficult to let go of what they're doing, not because they're, as an educator, I'm resistant to something personally, or not because they're ill-intended, because they think that what they're doing is working, and they think that it's effective, and they're preparing their students for the vision of what they think they're preparing their students for. So I think that's really wise to, change that, help them change that vision of what are we preparing our students for. I think that's a really great point, and getting that industry input and the higher ed input to what that is, especially when it's not just generic information, but really specific to your region, your area, the universities where your students may be going, and the industry where they might be ending up in their careers. So that's a great strategy to do that. And I think that just enlightens our teachers to seeing things a little bit more differently. So thank you for sharing that. Looks like we have a little bit of a rebellion happening. Nicole mentioned that, and same challenges, and change is hard. Absolutely. So
I'd like to, if I can, and Michelle just wrote about it, as I mentioned at the onset of this Zoom meeting and my difficulties with the PowerPoint, Michelle speaks to the concerns-based adoption model, which dates back 30, 40 years ago. I have found more experiences, not specifically to science, but attached to that notion of change is hard. And if you are not familiar with concerns-based adoption model and how to move people along from even wanting to become aware of something to a routine use of a new initiative, there's some really good work there that helps to explain the process, actually, that both people as well as the initiative work themselves through, if you will. And certainly after this, when we post the information from this Zoom meeting, I can share some resources about, it's sometimes known as CBAM, and I think helps folks with the fact that change is so hard. I see, Jonna, you're shaking your head yes to that, so I can share that. So do you want to take it there? We've got only about 6 more minutes or so, and I want to make a couple of final comments, but I want to turn it first back to you, Jonna.
Oh, I mean, if we want to wrap up, I think that that's probably the biggest conversation around having anything around instructional shifts or shifts in anything is that change is hard, and that recognizing the levels of change and thinking of it as a system and where each individual is, and helping people to be more reflective on that. And CBAM is a very tried and true, well-known model of helping implement change, but also keeping your finger on the pulse of where everyone is and what their level of resistance is, because most often those rebellions that you're experiencing aren't always about just being rebellious by nature. Sometimes it's just about lack of understanding or lack of seeing the purposefulness of it, and certainly might be well intended to resist that change, particularly, and I can speak to kind of going back to Helene's original theme of being out of our comfort zone and being in this kind of new world here, particularly for those of us who've been in education for a long time. And you think about the amount of initiatives that have come and gone and the things where people have seen change happen. And, sometimes the mindset is, well, if I just put my head down and just ignore this, this too will pass. So, moving this away from the flavor of the week and into something much more meaningful. And, the real impact comes when teachers recognize that what this is good work on behalf of their students. And that even if the state wasn't implementing NGSS, even if your district wasn't moving in this direction, that they would do it anyway because they believe it's the right thing to do. So what we know, and from research that I've done personally, research that we've interacted with, is that action precedes belief, which is interesting because we think that belief precedes action. We think that in many instances we need people to believe that this is the right thing to do, and then to buy in, so to speak. But what we know, and if you think about your own experiences, you really don't believe in something until you've seen results, until you've done something that sees some sort of either improvement or evidence that it's successful. So those rebellions sometimes need, or even sometimes our change process is, we just need to do this. We need to do this so that we can see results and success. Then the belief will come. So just, keeping that in mind that, moving for action, certainly not forsaking belief, certainly not the fact that, we don't want people to understand. We want them to understand. But we know sometimes that, buy-in isn't going to happen until we actually see evidence and results. So, Helene, did you want to speak to, oh, no, wait, that's my slide again here. Wrap it up with this, describing one action to support teachers as they make the shift. We have like 3 more minutes. Do we want to just put that in the chat box or make that some food for thought for the next discussion?
What if we could hear from maybe 3 people, one action to take away, and then chat box, but food for thought as we keep this conversation going. So we have 3 people who are willing to share one specific action you can take to support teachers as they make this shift.
I'd like to prompt Caroline Keel from the Institute for Systems Biology to give us the web link to their high school courses so that teachers can see what physics, chemistry, and earth science might look like at high school through a different lens.
Caroline, are you on?
Yeah, Ellen, do you mean the modules from the C program? Okay, I'll put that in the chat box.
2 other people for a specific action to support teachers as they make the shift?
For collaboration, certainly.
I'll jump in. This is Linda at ESD 171. I think actually going out, as I think of, our region, Graham in Wenatchee, and then our gal up in Leavenworth, Cascade, actually seeing it. Sometimes, it's like our students who aren't quite getting our learning objective. If they can go out and see it in action and see what these kids are doing, there's that aha of, oh, I do need to make a shift in my practice.
Thanks so much, Linda and others. Jonna, final comments before I close us out?
No, I appreciate all this conversation, Helene, and I wanted my audio, you might be able to hear me, but my audio of hearing you has not been wonderful. So I apologize to everyone for that. But I do think that this conversation is so valuable. And the fact that you all are sharing and breaking down those barriers is really a testament to your dedication. So I just want to thank you and honored to be part of the conversation and the work that you're all doing. So we were moving toward, we were moving toward our kind of wrapping it all up with everything here, but let me move to our final slide around the idea of, moving forward with your next steps. So Helene, I'm just going to leave this with you and we can wrap up and you can plan your next steps.
I believe you will all join me in thanking Jonna and her colleagues for getting us going on this very, very important and obviously surface topic that's of great interest. And I want to thank every one of you who has shared resources through the chat box, and we will we'll find a mechanism for making sure that those go out to each of you. I want to also let you know that we have recorded this Zoom meeting, and we will make that available on our website under conference resources, I believe is the place. If that changes from that, then we'll get that information out to you about where it will be housed. I think, sitting here with Ellen from OSPI and knowing how many ESD folks as well as district folks are participating kind of says, here are what some regional and or statewide efforts can be. And to some degree, everybody is experiencing the same kinds of issues, and if not yet, will, and if have already, have some strategies that you used. So appreciate that. Also know that now you know, here's another level of conversation, not starters necessarily, but places to take your conversations and your dialogue back at home. So while chatting with 50 plus participants who have been online with us, I think you did one heck of a job. Jennifer, in final moments, can I turn to you as chair of the WASA IPAC group for any comments you might have?
I just want to thank everybody for participating today, and to remember to let us know if there's some ongoing conversation points that you'd like to have another webinar, another time to come together as a group of leaders working in this area to have some more conversation and some more dialogue. We'd love to connect with everybody from around the state and do this again. It's been valuable for me, and I hope everybody else who's been here or on this webinar has also found it valuable.
What a great way to start the morning. Thanks to all of you. So appreciate your engagement this morning. Have a terrific day. Jonathan, thanks again. Love it. Thank you.